And 10 minutes after 10 on a Friday morning. Card not recognised, machine not in use, no signal, just some of the obstacles motorists face when trying to pay for parking these days. A survey by the RAC has found 3/4 of drivers have had issues using parking apps on their phones. Because of that, the motoring organisation said drivers should not be forced to use them to pay for parking, and an alternative method should always be made available. So what's been your experience of this? Has paying for parking just become a bit of a nightmare thanks to tech? Call 08085 92 95 00 or text 80295. What's been your experience of this? Does it need to be made easier to pay for parking? Have you faced an eye-watering charge? Are you fighting one right now? We've got the complaints resolver joining us this morning. If you need some help with that, 80295 to text us, or 08085 92 95 00. Has parking become a bit of a nightmare? Let's go to Aberdeen. Dennis is there this morning. Dennis, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. What's been your experience?
Well, I'm just going into town just now, and it's always with a degree of trepidation that we face the consequence of running into a spider's web. It's a motor spider's web in Aberdeen with bus lanes, no-go lanes, LEZ areas, and restrictions. And when you finally get to a car park, the app doesn't work because it's crashed and there's no machines working. And you're allegedly then meant to phone the council to say, the machine's not working, please be advised, I'm not leaving a ticket in my car. But you can't get through the council, you just can't get through. It's as simple as that.
Have you ended up with a ticket? Have you ended up with a fine?
Yes.
How much did that cost you?
Aberdeen's very expensive, up to £3 for 20 minutes. It's a very expensive place to park.
Yeah.
Basically, everyone in Aberdeen are kind of shopping outside Aberdeen now because it's much easier to shop in Inverurie and Stonehaven and West Hill.
And you're not faced with the apps issue around that. Dennis,
Correct.
Thanks for your time on this. Have a good weekend, Dennis. 80295 to text us, or 08085 92 95 00 if you've been stung like that with parking charges you didn't expect. If you've struggled to use a parking app, if technology is getting in the way, actually, rather than making it easier for you to park. Scott Dixon is known as the complaints resolver. He's with us this morning. He sorts this stuff out for people. Scott, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
Have you seen a big rise in the number of people contacting you because of these parking apps?
Yes, I have, Stephen, and it is a big problem. And your caller before the news, I've put out a Substack at 7:30 this morning covering exactly the same scenario. And a former boss of mine, he contacted me. He parked in Dublin Street in the new town of Edinburgh, and he put in the wrong Ringo code. Same scenario. It was just one digit wrong, and it's £6 per hour for a 4-hour maximum stay. And despite proof of payment, the council rejected his appeal, and he asked me if I could help because he thought it was unfair and he felt hard done by, and he knew if anybody could sort it, I could. So because his appeal was rejected, which they always are, it's all about the money, isn't it? So my advice was to escalate it as a formal complaint with the council, because mistakes happen, but councils and private parking operators, they are relentless and unforgiving, and they rarely show any common sense or discretion. It's all about the money. And Edinburgh City Council has a 2-stage complaints procedure. And stage 1, they're meant to respond within 5 working days. Rarely happens. So you take it to the stage 2 process, and that's an in-depth investigation, and it requires a 28-day response. And this falls under the Equality Act 2010 and the Scottish Government's decriminalised parking enforcement principles. So under the Equality Act 2010, service providers, including councils, they have a legal duty to make reasonable adjustments for people with protected characteristics, including those with dyslexia. And you don't have to prove that you have dyslexia. And apparently, around 10% of the population are believed to be dyslexic, according to the British Dyslexia Association. That's about 6.3 million people across the whole of the UK. And the Scottish Government's decriminalised parking enforcement guidance does not specifically mention keying errors, but it emphasises that enforcement must be fair, reasonable and proportionate. So minor foreseeable human errors where payment is clearly being made should be mitigated and the fine cancelled. And he hasn't deprived the council of any income, just simply made a mistake, a keying error. And he put these points to the council through the complaints route, and the decision was overturned and the fine was cancelled.
Ah, interesting. What are the common problems with these apps? When people contact you, what tends to be going wrong, Scott?
It's connection problems, and it's maybe over 30 different parking apps across the whole of the UK, and not everybody has a mobile phone, and getting a connection and signal problems and things like that. And these apps, they're not foolproof, and a faulty app that prevents you from paying does not comply with the Consumer Rights Act 2015. And you'll have heard about Martin James talking about the Consumer Rights Act 2015 on the weekly consumer surgery. And apps are classed as digital content contracts, and they fall under Section 34 to 36 of the Consumer Rights Act 2015, and they need to be of satisfactory quality, fit for a particular purpose, and as described. And a faulty app does not meet the Consumer Rights Act 2015, and you can appeal on that basis.
Okay, well, if somebody's listening to this maybe and they're struggling with this, we've got Scott with us for the next few minutes this morning. So if you're struggling with a parking charge at the moment, if you are in a battle with a parking provider around this, if you just had problems using these apps and the tech is just not working for you at the moment, let us know about it. It's 80295 to get in touch, or give us a call, 08085 92 95 00, 10:17 on a Friday. BBC Radio Scotland. Feels like Fleetwood Mac, and no wonder. That's Miley Cyrus featuring Lindsay Buckingham and Mick Fleetwood. 10:22 on a Friday, BBC Radio Scotland. Card not recognised, machine not in use, no signal available. Maybe some of the things you've encountered trying to pay for parking these days. A survey by the RAC has found 3/4 of drivers say they've had issues using parking apps, and because of that, the motoring organisation says drivers should never be forced to use them. There should always be an alternative way to pay for parking. So what's been your experience of this? Has paying for parking because of the tech become a bit of a nightmare? Call 08085 92 95 00 or text us this morning 80295. What's the picture where you are? What's it like? We heard from Dennis in Aberdeen. What's it like where you are? What are some of the obstacles that you've faced? Have you ended up with eye-watering charges? Have you ended up being caught out by this? What's been your experience of it? And what needs to change as well, do you think? Let's go to Glasgow and speak to Calvin next this morning. Calvin, morning.
Good morning.
Morning. What's been your experience?
So I've recently seen people being caught out with scams at the machines. So because of the limited ways to pay there's ways scammers have been exploiting it, basically. And with the prices you're paying for parking these days, and there's just not been a lot done with it, and we're being forced to use online payment methods rather than the machines. The machines aren't being maintained, they're always very dirty or not working. And as a student in Glasgow, the trains are unreliable, so I'm forced to drive quite a lot of the time to get in and study. And I just think we should have more ways to pay. It shouldn't be forced to pay online all the time.
Yeah, it does feel like that. It feels like you're running out of choices on this now, doesn't it? That you're just being pushed in one direction on it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, as well, from thinking for a different generation, there's people that won't have access to use QR codes, people who wanting to use cash to pay, and they've had that option taken away from them basically because we're being forced to pay online.
Sure, and people that don't have smartphones as well. Calvin, thanks for your call this morning. 08085 92 95 00. Maggie's in Glasgow this morning. Maggie, morning.
Hello there, good morning.
Morning. What about you? What's been your experience?
Very similar to the person, I think it was Dennis from Aberdeen.
Yeah.
And just to truly say that every single thing he said is absolutely spot on. I had a late diagnosis of dyslexia. Kind of went under the net, and reading and writing isn't that much of a challenge, but sequencing is a huge problem. Mm-hmm. I simply cannot use the apps unless my husband or my friend or member of the family is with me. I cannot park. I cannot use these things. So I don't carry a mobile, like your previous caller was saying. A lot of people don't, but I don't carry a mobile because I can't use a mobile. I can't get to grips with the sequencing of it, despite getting good tutorship from the Glasgow Disability Alliance. It's a real problem.
Do you know, hadn't thought about this at all before, so I'm really grateful for your call this morning. You're right, you see on the side of these machines there's a number, Maggie, isn't it, you've got to put into your phone to use the parking app, and just for some people that's just not an option.
That's right. That's right.
Have you been caught out? I mean, have you ended up with fines because of this?
I just simply can't park. I've never. I can't park. They're extremely expensive, these parking fines, and it means that there's all sorts of things that I'm excluded from, and I don't need to repeat the what Dennis said about reasonable adjustments, because he explained it very articulately.
So you could park.
Particularly local authorities should be required to make reasonable adjustments in terms of disability. In my work, my team and my manager were brilliant in making reasonable adjustments. And I didn't feel as if I had a disability because there was no problem, because the reasonable adjustments were there.
Yeah. So you could park if you could still use coins, of course, but a lot of these machines these days just don't take coins. They just don't want money.
That's right. Because they don't want to pay somebody to come and empty them. It's all the bottom line.
Yeah.
I'm not being cynical, but I am being sceptical. The Scottish Government and the local authorities, it's just the bottom line. How can we save money? How can we, not employ people to do various tasks? And they're just not, paying any regard to people such as Dennis or to myself or to your previous caller, who quite rightly said a lot of people simply don't carry mobile phones.
Maggie, thanks for your call this morning. Maggie in Glasgow feels excluded because of this technology. We're going to hear from the parking organisations behind this in just a second, but let's jump up to Ballater. Francis is there this morning as well. Francis, morning.
Hi, good morning to you.
Morning. What's been your experience?
Well, I don't really have any experience of it, because the last time I was in a parking place, I just paid with the 10 pence or whatever into the machine. But
when was that?
19 cakes ago. No, but what I'm getting at here, Stephen, is the fact that I spent over 51 years with BT, and I could see the technology was ramping up, but there's a lot of people who just didn't switch on to it and prefer to stay off grid, as you could say. Right now, so you've got somebody like myself coming into a parking place. You've got to load up your telephone with an app. You don't have a mobile telephone. What happens to the people who don't have mobile telephones? Are they're obviously prevented from parking in these pay-as-you-go places.
Let's put that to the test. Francis, thanks for the question this morning. Scott Dixon, the complaints resolver, is with us, who does a lot of work in this sector. Scott, what's the future for people like Francis that just don't have a mobile phone, don't have access to the apps, when there's more and more pressure for people to pay that way?
It's a big problem, Stephen, and this would explain why there's a decline in footfall in towns and city centres, and it's on the news today. I think it's a 2.3% decline in footfall over the past quarter in the cities across Scotland, and people are avoiding towns and cities for that reason. And retail parks are thriving because they offer free parking and a frictionless experience. And I think we need to revisit how people pay for parking. If you go into a shop, for example, you've got a choice to pay either by cash or card, and you can speak to a human if you've got any problems. And if you can't pay, you would just leave the goods on the counter and walk away. But you don't have an invisible clock ticking linked to ANPR cameras recording your entries and exits and issuing fines and parking charge notices. And what the parking associations won't tell you is that when it comes to apps and machine failures, when a payment fault occurs, the app provider should automatically notify the parking operator that the system is unavailable, and payment machines should flag when they are offline, and enforcement should be suspended until at least one payment method is restored. And in reality, this rarely happens, and many operators don't monitor or log system downtime accurately, which means motorists' photos and screenshots are usually the only record of a genuine system failure. And that explains why so many parking charge notices and fines issued by councils are issued in these circumstances, and why evidence is critical for all appeals.
Got you, Scott. Thanks for your time on this morning. Scott Dixon online as the complaints resolver. Let's take all this to Chris Naylor, who's Head of Membership and Relations at the International Parking Community, representing parking providers. Chris, good morning.
Morning, Stephen.
Thanks for being with us this morning. Customers aren't happy.
Yeah, and we can completely understand the principle behind having multiple payment channels and payment options available to people. We've got to kind of agree that parking is a service. You are providing a service, and therefore, it's in the parking operator or the local authority's best interest to enable people to make payment. Actually, the last thing that car park providers want to do is to issue tickets to people who haven't paid, because the cost of resolution and things like that and the cost of enforcement is really high. That what people want is an ability for people to actually come onto the site, make payment and go about their day, go about their business in a completely kind of seamless way. You almost want to make parking forgettable. The parking charge is actually only there to encourage compliance. What people want is people to be able to go onto sites and make payment. And in the majority of locations, there are more than one payment method available to people.
Are you trying to phase out cash from car parks, Chris?
Absolutely not. No, but there was a big push through COVID to be able to provide different kind of payment options due to the fact that there was so much kind of concern over contact and things like that. So operators were forced to provide technology-based solutions from there. There are also issues, and there are issues with machines that are vandalised and cash being stolen out of machines and things like that. But no, there's no desire from the sector to be phasing out cash.
We've had a number of people pointing out the problems for those with dyslexia who are trying to use parking apps and may just get something wrong putting in the codes and end up with a fine as a result of it. How should that be resolved?
So within the private parking sector at the moment, there is a single code of practice that's been launched by the IPC and the BPA in collaboration. One of the parts of that is that there is an appeals charter that sits within the code that's got effectively some exemptions and cases where charges should be reduced. So part of it is that if there is a minor keying error, that sits within an exemption. So you might not realise at the point of issue that the VRM has been entered incorrectly, but it can be dealt with through the appeals charter, and that is actually, that is mandated on operators to take into consideration at the appeal stage.
Have you ever had a parking fine, Chris?
Prior to working in the industry, I have from a local authority, and it's strange. It is one of those. It's one of those things that, one of your first thoughts is, how can I get out of this? And
any advice?
Well, one of my first thoughts was, how can I get out of this? It wasn't, have I got this genuinely? And quite often you look at it and you think, no, do you know what? The signage was clear. My requirements were of what I had to do to comply were there, and actually I've bent the rules slightly. And sometimes you have to hold your hands up and say it's a fair cop.
Chris, thanks for your time this morning. Chris Naylor is from the International Parking Community, representing private parking providers.